Full steam ahead then. Sorry. All right. Call to order. We do have a quorum here. And it looks like next will be additions or modifications to the agenda. I've got a couple here. I propose that we remove item 5.03, 21st century policing from the agenda. And I also move that we add Kyle Dodson to talk about his role in police transformation and take questions, any questions that we have. I also ask that we add a discussion on the City Council resolution from 9/8, specifically their ask, which was, sorry, where did it go? Specifically, the ask was, be it further resolved that the City Council requests that the Police Commission immediately begin a review and analysis of impediments to stronger disciplinary measures in police encounters involving brutal or excessive force, and recommendations for modifications with a report back to City Council on November 30th, 2020. I also asked that we add a discussion on in regards to the mayor's press conference ask from Friday, specifically in regards to forming a policy on the release of investigations into officer misconduct. Any discussions over it? Or I guess I think it has to be, sorry, Shannon?
Ask for a second, and then I think you can discuss.
Okay, do we have a second on any of those points?
Second.
You all seconds it. Any discussions over these amendments? I'm not seeing any. All in favor of the motion I presented, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Moving on. Sorry, moving on to approval of the minutes from last meeting, 8/25/2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? That's the motion. I second it. All in favor?
Second.
Oh, sorry. I think I messed that up. Sorry. I motion to adopt the minutes from 8/25/2020. I heard a second. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 3.01, public forum. Shannon, take it away, please.
First up, we have Lee Morgan. Lee, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I had to pull over. I'm driving. Just 1 second.
Thank you for pulling over.
Okay, I am ready.
Take it away.
Okay. Hello, commissioners. My name is Lee Morgan, and I'm a resident of the New North End. As calls for change in policing resonate throughout Burlington and the rest of the country, we must consider ideas and policies large and small to heal our community and move forward. I feel that a first step should be breaking down the barriers between the police force and citizens that reinforce an us versus them mentality. As an example, with the exception of Jason Bellavance, Corey Campbell, Joseph Carreau, and the few officers I have met during the course of the Battery Park protest, I have no idea who is policing my community. Tremendous power is given to the officers. Citizens should have the right to know and interact with the officers who they may see during the worst moments of their lives. Police officers should not be anonymous until they are in front of you. Cast away the anonymity of the police force. Begin by posting officers' names and pictures on the BPD website. This is standard practice in many Vermont towns. Continue by providing community opportunities to interact virtually or in person as suitable to talk with officers. We must know each other. We are a community, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
And next up, we have Martha Molpus, followed by Mr. Daiwa. Martha. Okay, Martha. You may have to unmute on your end. There you go. Perfect.
All right. My name is Martha Molpus, and I live in Ward 7. I am speaking to express my appreciation for Mark Hughes' service as a police commissioner. Mark's honesty and tireless commitment to dismantling systemic racism are outstanding. I trust these qualities will also guide the Burlington Police Commission going forward. Thank you, Mark, and thank you all.
Thank you, Martha.
And then Allie, maybe.
I believe he's with
Counselor,
Councilman Jang. So if you want to promote him, perfect.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm wearing a mask and I'm with Mr. Jawara. And now this is a question for Chair Gamash. And was just wondering if it's now 4 minutes for him to be able to speak since we are together.
No, I'm happy with giving him as much time as he needs to speak to this complaint. I would also like to ask the fellow commissioners that normally we hear complaints in executive session, and that I ask that we refrain from asking any questions at this time until the formal process starts, and then we can ask questions at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
My name is Ishmael Diawara. I'm a US citizen. On February 3rd, 2015, I was hit by incoming car in front of my apartment, 60 Archibald Street. A lady hit me, broke my left knee. So the lady came out of the car, tried to comfort me, say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Excuse me, what's your name?" I say, "Ishmael." "Oh, Ishmael, I'm so sorry." So my daughter my daughter came downstairs, take my phone on the floor, call 911. While we're waiting for the police, a cab driver called Jim. We all used to drive cab at the airport. Jim came, meet me on the floor with my broken knee. He started cursing me, start telling me all kind of a bad word. "You son of a this, you son of a that, go back to your country, you this, you that," a lot of stuff. My daughter almost jumped on him. So, and he removed the woman's car from the accident scene so he can get through to go. So he left before the police get there. So when the police officer came, I was on the floor and he talked to me for a little while. At that time, the ambulance was there to take me to the UVM hospital. So when I get to the UVM hospital, after I think 1 hour or so, the police officer came back to the hospital. He talked to me for a few minutes, then he left. After when he left, he never asked for my weaknesses. The people that were standing with me, Mr. Abu Kaba and his wife, those are the two people that were standing with me while I get hit by this car in front of my apartment. So a few weeks later, or maybe a month later, we'll get the accident report. So in the accident report, the police officer mentioned that it was my fault. I get hit by a car in front of my house. They said it was my fault. So I tried everything. The insurance company never take my case. They never pay for my medical bill. They never able to do anything for me. So why the police officer have to listen to Jim that have a long criminal record in Vermont here. I can give you the accident report. You can see his name. The guy have a long criminal record, and he was not at the accident scene. The people that was standing with me at the accident scene, the police officer refused to talk to them. He never talked to them. He just made the accident report based on the two witnesses that the lady present. He made the accident report based on that. So to find me guilty. So since then, my life is completely messed up. And I was born 1962. I'm 58 years old now, almost going to 59. I can't walk anymore. I have 5 kids, 1 granddaughter. Life has been hard for me. And I try to go everywhere for me to get help. No one is willing to help me. Somebody helped me, I think 2017, to see the police commissioner, Depozo. So Depozo allowed my 2 witnesses to give a statement that day, 2017. So since then, it's like it's not working for me. Nothing is right. Everywhere I go, I can't get no help. And my life is really messed up right now, to be honest with you. So I'm looking forward for someone to look into my case. I just want justice to be served. That is my main problem right now. And I become permanently disabled. I have handicap sticker on my car. Metal inside my left leg. And no one is willing to help me out. Thank you very much for listening to me. God bless you.
Thank you very much for that.
So I did have 2 more requests come in. First is Marcia. I'm gonna have to promote you, Marcia, and then I'll disable you after. If you want to, there you go, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Marcia Johnson. I'm a 32-year-old resident of Ward 3, and I'm one of the many supporters of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. And I just wanted to call and voice my support for their vision of policing. I also wanted to agree with the first caller who said that it would be really nice for police to have their pictures on the website so people can actually know who they are, and I don't know, maybe see them as part of the community instead of just kind of like she said, that I have no idea who any of them are except for the ones involved in like lawsuits. So I thought that was a really great idea. And I feel like people should have the right to know what officers Crow and Campbell look like so they can kind of, I don't know, act accordingly. So thank you all so much for your work, and thanks for taking the time to listen.
Thank you.
And then is it Els? I apologize, Els Curtis, Elise.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm new to this, but I wanted to say how much I'm trying to find ways to support both the people who are looking for fair and safe community policing, et cetera, but also I've had many interactions with first responders over the years. These are, by the most part, extremely dedicated and good people. I'm trying to find a way to support both sides. And I particularly want to mention the language for reframing that is being introduced out of John Jay College for Policing in their series about revisioning public safety. It's very much in keeping with what the mayor has offered. And I just want to call for new language that's less polarized and more inclusive. And I think John Jay's doing a great job, and I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. That's it.
Thank you.
Whoops.
And that is all that I had as far as requests for public comment.
Awesome. Moving on. Moving on is item 4.01, which is the chief's report. Chief Murad, please take it away.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be with you tonight on this rainy evening as brownouts happen, and my wife tells me that power's out in the New North End, and I guess I'm glad I'm still in my office, sort of, because at least I've got the power here. That is electrical power, not the other kind. With regard to the month, we've had a very busy month. So in the 35 days since our last meeting on August 25th, I submitted, probably not quickly enough, but it is up on board docs, the numbers for this period. And it's 2,292 calls for service, 26 assaults with 9 of them aggravated or felonious, 4 sex assaults, 2 robberies, 229 suspicious events, a category that we've talked about before and that we need to learn how to drill into as we talk about how we really distinguish what our call volume is. I'm hopeful that some of the things that are going to come out of the joint committee may very well help us be able to distinguish what is in that suspicious event category, and that we can have dispatch, a more robust dispatch than we have right now, be able to really learn how to triage these calls and define them in new ways. They do great work, dispatch, but they are stretched at the moment. We had 148 noise complaints, 126 vehicle crashes, one of which was sadly a fatal accident that occurred just near 1 North Avenue. 87 disturbances, 77 incidents of traffic, 73 foot patrols. Officers are still out there on foot doing their work. 62 threats or harassment, 49 domestic incidents. No domestic misdemeanors, but 3 domestic felonies. 8 incidents of fireworks, which is sort of a holdover from the summer and probably will become less interesting as a category as the year goes on. 6 overdoses and 9 untimely deaths. We actually have officers on such a call right now. And in the midst of this, there has been a huge amount of community support from our Queen City Police Foundation, from members of the community. Been a lot of food brought to officers, homemade food. We don't take other kinds, but there are people coming and talking about support for these officers, which is great because we've been very busy. Just this past weekend alone, and I'll just give a smattering. Friday night at the Congregational Church, Justin Reynolds, who bit an officer in October of last year and bit him hard enough to break his skin and was a felony assault and has had 26 law enforcement involvement since then, including 6 arrests and multiple assaults, stabbed somebody allegedly on Friday night at the Congregational Church. On North Beach, on Saturday, beautiful day, hopefully not the last one of the summer, but a gorgeous day. More than 1,000 people, we've had estimates as high as 2,000, were on North Beach, many of them college students, many of them apparently drawn by some social media posts. We had UVM PD join us down there. UVM took IDs in order to enforce its green and gold pledge on students who are in an environment that clearly is in contravention to the governor's order. A burglary that night, which we put out a press release about at Battery Street Jeans. An individual shattered the entire front door, went inside, officers responded, were able to locate him there. He retreated and farther back into the building, and we spent 30 minutes negotiating with him for a safe surrender. And that worked out the way it's supposed to work, with officers who do that and care about the work that they're doing, care about keeping everybody involved safe. And a similar incident the following night with regard to keeping everybody safe. A reckless driver, a person with whom we have a long history, a person who was arrested only about a month ago, early on during the protests that are now in Battery Park. His arrest occasioned an early group of the protesters to march on 1 North Avenue to demand his release. In that instance, he'd been following somebody in road rage. On Sunday night, we had literally dozens of witnesses over the course of several hours calling in about reckless driving on his part, extremely reckless driving, almost hitting pedestrians, racing through downtown, through the crowded parts of downtown, Bank Street, Church Street, College Street. We attempted to stop him once, did not pursue when he fled. We then located his car, waited for him to exit. He did not. He took off again, driving more erratically and recklessly. Officers returned to 1 North Avenue, executed a tactical plan that involved trying to sort of figure where he was going to be, to post in those locations with spike strips and appropriate tools in order to be able to bring this to a halt before someone was killed or hurt, and then executed that plan very, very well. I was able to sit with them yesterday evening as they did an after action review on Monday night, which was that team's Friday. So that team went out for the weekend, for their weekend, on a high note. A strong culture of self-assessment, a culture of self-assessment that has existed in this department for a long time, a willingness to look at what they do, look at how they do it, improve it, and not be satisfied with what was an incredibly safe outcome. This individual has fought with police officers in the past. He has barricaded himself, assaulted officers. In this instance, once those tires were punctured and the vehicle was brought to a halt, the surrender was relatively quick, and there were clear instructions given, and it was a safe situation for all, with no harm to anyone, including the great number of pedestrians and people in Burlington who were endangered by that. Suicide in the New North End on Monday morning. It was a pretty bad scene, and officers absorbed that and dealt with that. A possible felony assault in the encampment on Monday. We know that an individual was severely injured in the encampment. We believe it to have been, according to his statements, houseless individuals who are now living in that encampment, but we are still in the process of investigating it. And then, as I said, officers right now at the scene of an untimely and helping a family through a terrible moment. With regard to the encampment, we have a number of persons of interest, people with whom we have long histories of engagement, who are staying in the encampment right now. Between the 8 that we were tracking earlier, there are about 10 now, but between those 8, there are more than 2,500 Valcor entries. So that is those are individuals who are significantly service resistant and people with whom we've had long involvements and are there now. I spoke for a while with a member of the encampment today who told me that, that there was a 24-hour food tent. There was medicine that was being provided. It no longer is. And as a result, we've brought, not we, but that situation has brought a lot of people into it who are not members of the activist community, who came there with, I think that there was a real sense, and I appreciate a sense that flourished there, a sense of community that said we can solve some of these problems that have eluded greater society and really address problems that have been allowed to fester for too long. But what has happened instead is that it has been largely compounded, and those individuals have been abandoned, and that encampment these folks are there now, and we need to figure out as a community, and certainly as a police department, how we can begin to outreach to them. It might be a positive that we now have a lot of them in a single location, and we can try to figure out how better to serve some of their needs. Other news in the chief's report, Jackie Corbally will be leaving us tomorrow. Will be her last day of service with the Burlington Police Department. She remains committed to the work that she does, and the work that she does has been so tremendously valued. She has literally saved lives in this community. The results that the CompStat process promoted by former Chief Del Pozo, by Mayor Weinberger, really, really underwritten by him and bringing together stakeholders with his credibility and authority, and then led by Jackie in the day-to-day of it, was demonstrably effective in changing the trajectory of the opioid epidemic in Chittenden County. And Jackie is owed a tremendous debt of gratitude by this county and community for that, and we will miss her. But with departures, we have new arrivals, of course, and that includes Director Dodson. So Kyle Dodson will be joining us. The mayor made an announcement about it on Friday. I am very excited to be working with him about this. As I said in remarks on Friday at Roosevelt Park, a park that really has seen a lot of change over the past several years because of an ability of this police department to work with the community. We have not been working with the community as well as we need to, and that's been brought to our attention and made apparent over the past over this past summer. And there are a lot of us that are pulling for change right now, but change does not come on the wheels of inevitability, as a great leader once said. So we have the mayor, we have the city council, police commission, yourselves, people who donate huge amounts of time and effort and passion to make their community better, the protesters and the advocates. And I know that I am too pulling for change, and so is this department, but we're still coalescing around what that change should be. How can we transform public safety while continuing to keep people safe? Because that is the bottom line, to keep people safe. I'm eager to see how Director Dodson can get all of these stakeholders to pull together so that we can coalesce and really get an idea of where it is that we're going. And having him on board here, both to gain an understanding of what the men and women here do, and then be able to take that forth out to stakeholders, and for us to be able to gain from him a better understanding and to have him inculcate in us a deeper understanding of these abiding inequalities that exist in our country, in our culture, and in our community is a path forward. And I'm very much looking forward to walking that road with him and moving forward on that. We have work ongoing with the Charter Change Committee, with the Joint Committee, discussions about equitable sharing, et cetera. We have some discipline issues, and we'll talk about some of those in our executive session. But I do want to point out that as a police chief, as a leader of police, we strive to teach our officers that it's important to demonstrate procedural justice and fairness when we deal with the community. And we need to express that internally too. And that's got to be a motivating factor in the discipline that we look at, whether it's the discipline that we talk about with the charter change, whether it's the discipline that we'll talk about in executive session together. Procedural justice and fairness are integral. They are the sine qua non of being able to deal with the public at large and make certain that we have police legitimacy. They are equally important internally. They have to be. And then last but not least, because it is absolutely not least, I regret to announce that our headcount effective is 85. We are down from 92 at the onset of the budget discussions to 85 effective. It's 86 with one long-term injury that we still have on. Now, that includes 3 departures that have been announced and papers that have been turned in, but those individuals still are here on our books at the moment. But when we take those out, and they largely are out, we are at 85. Now, 85 may not sound like a tremendously lower number than 92, which is where we started, but 92 was already far lower than we normally function. We were authorized at 105. We were routinely in the 97 to 98 range. That's where we have a sweet spot of functionality. 85 gets us dangerously close to a place where our functionality starts to suffer. You can't have officers back each other up the same way when you have short shifts. You can't have officers be able to take time the way they need to take time to recharge, to invest in their families, to be able to pull away from this job, which, as I said, with regard to things like suicides, like untimely deaths, like violent robberies, can be a traumatic and difficult job. And so when we get to this point that we're at right now, and will only descend further from, we are in a position of really having to ask, what kinds of resources do we have? What kinds of resources are we going to have to pull back from? I'll say too that these departures began at the time of the budget changes, because we see only about 5% of the people who apply to us end up being hired. And it's an even smaller number that end up being officers, because more officers drop off during the academy process. More officers drop out during our extensive field training, which is the longest in the state. And so we go from 5% hires of all applicants to even fewer actually making it to the road. Other agencies have equally arduous application processes. There are background checks, there are polygraphs, and even for people who are already level 3 certified law enforcement officers in Vermont, they have to go through all those things for their other agencies. So we are in the process of having officers who are in those processes with other agencies. It'll take them time. So it seems as if it wasn't immediate, but those processes began almost immediately upon the budget decisions. So we are going to have to move forward with that. That is our truth. The situation that we're facing, and it's the real one, is how are we going to do this? And so again, there are a lot of different venues for that right now, whether it's the Joint Committee, the Public Safety Committee, the Police Commission itself, and I'm really looking forward to having Director Dodson on board to help guide some of that.
Thank you, John, for that. All right. Before we move into agenda items number 5, I do want to say that I plan on doing 5.01, 5.02, and then in lieu of 5.03, 21st century policing, we'll tackle the amendments to adding on, and I hope to have Kyle ready by 7 p.m. To jump in on discussion before we get into 5.05.
I apologize, Chair. Can I ask a question about the chief's report?
Yes, of course. My apologies.
This is actually just a clarifying question. A couple of clarifying questions. The first was just with respect to, so in the list, this is in the description of the calls for service that you list. You say 126 vehicle crashes, and in that parenthesis say 45 LSA. Could you just tell me what LSA stands for?
Apologize. Leaving the scene of an accident.
Thank you.
So we're supposed to say crashes now, not accidents, but all of our language still includes accident, including most of the Valcor entries. But LSA stands for leaving the scene of an accident.
Thank you. And then the second question was just, so you described 73 foot patrol. So I was just wondering if you could describe kind of what constitutes a foot patrol. Is that going to be for a set period of time? Is that just going to be kind of any period of time which officers are not on call but are engaged with the community? And what would constitute foot patrol?
So that's an officer saying, that's an officer getting out of his or her vehicle on Church Street and saying, I'm on foot patrol. Show me on foot patrol. I'm 10-8 for calls, which means I am available for calls, but I'm on this call, this foot patrol. And in that, there can be any number of things that happen. If a new incident evolves from that, somebody comes up and says, I was just harmed, or I can't find my child, then they'll open a new incident for that missing person. But the foot patrol is a way of saying, I'm out of my car, I'm in this location, I may not be immediately accessible to a vehicle, for example, but I'm doing this work, and tracking it's very important.
Is that discretionary for the officers then?
Yes and no. I mean, it's discretionary when they do it, but if you're a D area officer, it's expected that is a significant part of your responsibility, is to be out there on foot and seeing it. And then frankly, that's a driver for D area officers. They want to be out and doing that kind of work.
Thank you.
D area, again, being the downtown area, Church Street, et cetera. We do it in other areas too. We'll see foot patrols in other parts of the city, but that's certainly where they're most focused.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 5.01, discussion on how the commission should handle citizen complaints. I'll start this one off. If I recall, when I joined the commission about several months ago, we didn't always get updates regularly on citizen complaints. When Chief Jen Morrison took over, she did streamline that process and made it so I believe we were subject to review of citizen complaints every single month in our meetings. And for egregious for very important egregious complaints, we were notified as soon as possible. And personally, I'm okay with receiving citizen complaints as we've been doing it for the last several months, but I'm open to suggestions, discussions from anybody that doesn't see that or wants to change how we do that. Chief Murad.
Didn't we just sort of create a draft and not draft anymore? We voted on and actually adopted a new policy for this. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're correct. That's why I don't see a need to change this at all, but I did see it on the agenda, so I could see that somebody wanted to talk about it. Shannon.
I just wanted to say that I believe Commissioner Durfee was the one, and I think it stemmed from last meeting when there was a complaint brought in front of everybody. And I just think that with the new commissioners, I think that, and I don't want to speak I'm not sure where she went to, but I don't want to speak on her behalf, but I think that was, am I right? Yeah. I think that they were looking more for clarification on when a complaint is addressed to the commissioners individually. Was that right, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think this might have stemmed from a conversation that we had about email complaints. Some of us get emails, and we were trying to figure out who should how to respond and who responds, and that has been clarified. So I'm sorry I didn't see it on the agenda. I've had a discussion with you about that, and I think I'm clear on how that works now, and I have read the policy. But this came up for me probably 3.5 weeks ago. We've also been talking, with the subcommittee, we also get to come up to speed with other folks that have been on the commission for a while. So there doesn't need to be any changes. It was just something that I didn't understand, but I'm good now.
Awesome. Anybody else with any further discussions on this?
I had a question.
Right.
And I have to apologize because I believe I need to go back and look at the policy a little bit more. Like, could we actually read them? We kind of have, like, for those of us who'd be interested in actually reading the complaints in full. Is that possible?
I'll take a stab at this, but then I'll let John correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we do have access to these. We do have to, I believe it's read only. So I believe we have to be at the station or be at BPD headquarters to review these documents in person. John, would you like to add anything further to that?
So you absolutely can read the incoming complaint, and I know I'd probably have to seek Joy's advice on this about where it can be seen or not. The complaint itself may be something that isn't necessarily protected in the same way as the records associated with it are. And the investigation, for example, that we share in executive session when we talk about how the incident shook out. But I'm not certain of that, so I defer to either Joy or Eileen if we can get them on.
Again, I guess then in regards to your question, Commissioner Grant, I will reach out to the city attorney and find clarification on that, and I'll CC you in that email.
Thank you. I would appreciate that because I am very curious to just learn more about a little bit more detail about the processing and the paths these complaints take and how something could go missing. I guess I'm like a dog with a bone with that one complaint that no one can account for exactly what happened to it. So I'd like to learn more about that process. So I'll wait to hear back on that. And then I did have a question about that email that was sent to us on August 25th. Chief, I was wondering, were you able to follow up with the officers with regards to the issues that were brought up in that email? And also, did this individual ever agree to submit it as a complaint or just to have it reviewed by the department? I don't think we ever heard back for sure on that. I think we were going to ask them if they wanted to. I'm not quite sure.
I can speak to that.
I'm not recalling this incident or the email complaint. I'm sorry.
So this was the gentleman who lives near City Market downtown and said there was a lot of drug activity right outside the corner of their house. What are the two streets? Mela, do you remember the two streets?
On Buell, yes.
Buell Street, yes.
Yeah.
So we did follow up on that. I'm not certain where that is. I need to dig into that again. I'm sorry. I apologize.
And I did reach out to the individual at that time the time of that meeting and again earlier today to remind the individual about the opportunity to speak with us, but I didn't hear back.
What I
So-
do know we did operationally is that we put a good deal of resources on that. So I'm actually, I regret that I forgot to say this during my chief's report, but Lieutenant Wade Lebrecht, who was our downtown lieutenant, has been promoted to acting deputy chief of operations for the duration of my position as acting chief, and is going to be functioning in that role. And I can't think of a better person to be doing it. I'm very, very, very happy that he agreed to that. He thought up a terrific. He was working very hard with Kara on the marketplace, and then extending that from the marketplace to that intersection of Buell and Winooski, Buell, and
Orchard
between the two
Terrace.
churches. And we put a lot of resources into that. We did make a big dent in the activity that was being seen in both churchyards for quite some time. Obviously, we did have a stabbing there on Friday night, so there are still people who go there, and there's still a locus of a certain amount of activity there. But we answered that individual's concerns with a lot of presence and enforcement as well on folks who were drinking in public in that location, who were being disorderly in those locations. And I think that I'm hopeful that the gentleman who wrote to us saw that and saw the benefit of that.
Okay, that sounds great. And then just some other questions. When you have a chance just to review that letter again, and I can forward to you if you need another copy of it. I was just also concerned about some particular statements they quoted from some officers, and we had talked about what was appropriate or not appropriate for the officers to have said about addressing some of those issues, although it obviously action's been taken since then. I still want to know if a certain message has been sent regarding some of the things that were said to Mr. Murphy.
You mean his allegation was that officers had said something to the effect of we're short-staffed and some of these enforcement efforts are more difficult because we're short-staffed. Is that correct?
That and one where he said, I'm sorry, I'm bringing it back up. He had spoke to one of the detectives, and then he wasn't getting any responses or follow-ups to his additional outreach. And then being told that, here it is, sorry, our budgets are being cut, go talk to the city council, we don't have the resources, we're cutting back on patrols, etc. When this is actually an area that has been a problem for some time now, even before all the discussions around the budget. And then also some of the comments about how even if arrests were made, how they wouldn't be followed up on. And you had mentioned that shouldn't be something in consideration, whether or not it goes to trial or gets convictions shouldn't be part of the consideration if there's, wrongdoing being seen. So I just wanted to make sure that all those items were addressed from his email.
I say frequently that what is or is not going to be done, or what officers think is or is not going to be done by the state's attorney, by judges, does not factor into the choices that we make. Okay. It's the choices that we make are dictated by the safety issues in front of us. And there are other outcomes that we can, in fact, affect. We, in both senses of the word, we can affect the outcome with an A, and we can effect outcomes in the sense of actually causing them and creating them with regard to voluntarily or preemptively diverting things into parallel justice paths, taking things to the CJC, and officers do before even referring it to the state's attorney. We've had a number of discussions recently with the state's attorney. Deputy State's Attorney Sally Adams has been presenting at roll calls over the past several days, hitting each of our roll calls in order to talk to them about the stresses that they are feeling in the ISA's office with regard to curtailing of court schedules owing to COVID-19. with regard to their differences, the things that they're now implementing, both in response to that and in general response to State's Attorney George's philosophy on what kinds of things the criminal justice system needs to do and how to best apply its resources. And so we're having those discussions. The idea of taking action is always going to be dictated by the behavior witnessed by the officer at hand.
Okay. And I understand and I appreciate all that. I thank you for reiterating that, because I think it's good for anyone that is watching or listening to the meeting now, or may watch the recorded versions later. But I just do want to make sure, because this email, this letter mentioned specific officers, that you did indeed touch base with them. They may be part of those roll calls, but at the same time, because they were specifically called out in this letter, I just want to make sure that you had an opportunity to discuss it with them.
I'm going to find that email right now.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to agenda item 5.02, which is a social media policy discussion. And I know the city came out with their social media policy that governs all city employees, including BPD. I think that was released about a couple months ago. And I think it had just barely come out before our last meeting. And so I know most of us looked over it. And I feel like moving forward, while I am in strong agreement with the current city one, I guess I would like some more guidance, I guess, moving forward, whether we should whether we should work on something that kind of is more BPD specific, that builds on top of this, or what. So I guess I'll open the floor to any thoughts people have on this. I guess my my thinking is that while the biggest concerns I'm hearing from the public in regards to social media is contact between BPD employees and the general public, specifically in regards to past chiefs. And I'm very, very much aware and concerned of the power dynamic that is in place when a chief or a supervisor or an officer, for that matter, would DM a person, a public citizen, and that is a very real thing. I do have reservations about just unilaterally dismissing all contact between that. I guess in regards to, like, I do see some extenuating circumstances where there could be times where they might have to reach out to citizens and to ask a question. But with that being said, I'm not married to anything, so I'd love to hear thoughts on that. Commissioner Hart.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the city's policy and what's out there for potential police specific policies, because certainly what we don't want to do is create two policies that make it cumbersome and difficult for BPD staff, right? So I'm still doing my homework in terms of reading, really working through the city's policies. It's pretty dense, and seeing if there are any provisions in the police context that aren't covered that I would recommend. So that's just me looking at it, and I'm happy to work with folks behind the scenes. So we're not, I think it could be something that could take up an entire meeting, which is fine, but like the body camera policy, I'm happy to work with folks offline if anyone's interested.
Is does the body cam consider as part of social media?
No, I was just using that as an example of how we have a subcommittee for that group.
Okay. All right. And I actually, can you can add me on that committee? I'd like to be part of that.
Absolutely.
Which committee? I'm sorry, maybe
The body cam one? If there is
Oh,
one.
sorry. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant in regards to social media policy. There is a subcommittee on currently with that involves Karen, Milo, and Randall on what you call it, on the body cam footage policy.
Okay.
I think.
If they don't mind, then I'm good.
Okay, I was gonna say. I mean, I'm pretty sure they could somehow involve you. I don't know how that would work with open meeting laws, because that'd be technically a quorum of if it was all four of you. But
yeah, it's fine. I just, as long as someone working on it, that's fine.
Okay. I'm sorry. I saw Commissioner Duffy's hand up.
No, I'm going to yield the floor to Matt Sullivan because he had his hand up. I was going to.
My apologies.
Well, no, I was going to say something to you, but he clarified it. So I'm sorry about that.
All right. Sorry, TC Sullivan.
I was just going to add that, Chair Gamache, you bring up some very good points. And one thing that's difficult and needs to be balanced is the fact that officers do not lose their constitutional rights as police officers. So as Commissioner Hart brought up, it is a fine balance, and we need to be careful not to create a standard that infringes on those rights also, while still being mindful of the power discrepancies that you reference.
Respect that. Commissioner Grant.
So, and having a chance to go through the city's policy in more detail, one of the things I was mindful of when I was looking at this policy is that we want to make sure that it protects us, the citizens of Burlington, from abuses that we know already happened. So it does now state that people cannot misrepresent themselves, because we are, of course, mindful, as was just said, about freedom of speech, but there's something different when someone is misrepresenting who they are in an effort to, I mean, the whole the situation was just so remarkable to me. The inability to accept or understand that there's going to be criticism, the thought of that would be a way to address criticism, and everything else that happened. So that is now clearly stated. But one of the other things that we've heard that are concerns from the public are about direct DMs. And there is nothing really addressing that. And I think that is still a concern. I'm not, if we can get a city policy that addresses everything, I don't see having to go through a specific policy for the department, but the direct DMs is still something that is an issue. And I feel needs to be stated somewhere that, unless someone gives their permission for that to happen, it shouldn't be done by any department heads, including in the police department. So some thoughts on that. I don't know if we go back to the mayor and just say, hey, can this be reviewed again so that it's added? I'm not sure how we would go about that, or if it would be, I hope that would be seen as a concern because citizens have spoken out about it.
Commissioner Harp.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, I would just mention as part of this discussion that most platforms give users some flexibility over who can contact them directly. So platforms give users the power to say, I don't want to be either kind of contacted directly by these specific individuals, or they can say, I don't want to be contacted by anybody that I'm not already kind of, associated with, affiliated with, or friends with on the site. So end users already have a certain amount of control over who can contact them. I am concerned about a general blanket prohibition against members, especially if it's something citywide, against members, heads of a department contacting individuals in the community directly. That seems to me to be counter to what it is that we actually want, which is to have, when necessary, kind of people having the capacity to clarify or respond to individuals with questions, concerns, et cetera, that they raise. The social media policy does say something like, comments sent should be used. I think that is clearly correct. I think that heads of departments, including police officers, should be mindful of the fact that there are, in fact, power dynamics there. But I would not personally support approaching the mayor's office and saying, let's reopen this for the purpose of including a blanket prohibition against any kind of head of a department across the city directly contacting another member of the public through these platforms. I think that seems to me to be overkill. And like I said, and I think that people who are concerned do have some tools available to them as individuals to regulate some of that behavior.
Any further questions or comments on this? So I guess what I'm gathering then, Emil's proposing a question to the mayor. Randall is proposing that we shouldn't do that. I guess our question is, do we feel the need to, I guess, further this along? And as of right now, I'm not seeing that, but I'm willing to table this. I guess I'm willing to table this for another month for people to, I guess, keep looking at this, and then come to a decision then to either adopt or to fully adopt their policy and leave that is, or move forward.
Move forward with I'm sorry. Move forward with a specific.
Yes, correct.
For the.
Mm-hmm. I saw a couple of head nods for tabling this. Commissioner Durfee.
I had a chance to really review this, and it is extensive. I just guess I want to really be clear. Are we talking about adding additional language to it, so as it pertains to the police department as employees?
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't believe that we would add additional language to that document per se. It'd be forming our own PPT specific social media policy that would, complement the city's policy.
Okay. I mean, I think Commissioner Grant and I are new, and if she would like to have some more time with it, I think that's what I'm, hearing. So I'd be willing to look at it again for our next meeting. I'm comfortable with it. It's pretty extensive. I've seen a lot of policy for social media, and it's pretty intense. But if we want to look at it some more, I would be, I'd be interested in what everybody else has to say. Like, try to get a consensus.
Commissioner Grant.
So this, I don't know if anyone saw the policy that the city had before, but it was definitely really lacking, to say the least. I got the sense when I first read it, after all these things started to occur, that it might have been something that had been neglected for a while, because it didn't seem to be keeping up with the times. So this is a huge improvement. And I don't want us to end up with all of these extra policies that everybody has to keep reviewing because there's a city policy and then there's other policies that are separate just for the police department. I feel if we can get a city policy that covers everything, and the fact that they are, this policy is addressing a lot, because that's what I look at. I look at, does this policy help address what happened so that we know that it's now covered, that the city has a very clear policy that states what is not being allowed, what is highly recommended, what is best practice. The only thing that is still an issue for me, and this is once again because citizens have brought this up, is the issue of the direct messaging. And I definitely understand Randall's point for sure, but I don't know, I guess the people that have been passionate about it happening to them have been passionate about it happening to them. And when it was talked about and then it happened again, I felt that that was an issue. So those are kind of my 2 cents there. I would not be leaning toward creating an entire new policy, but I do want to make sure what the city has covers everything that was an issue before. Thank you.
All right then. So I guess then moving forward, I guess there's maybe not much more discussion. I guess. Sorry, Commissioner.
Perhaps
Hart.
we just, if anyone feels like this is a proposal that if anyone in the next, prior to the next notice or October's meeting feels as though there's more to discuss, they want to bring anything related to it, maybe that's how we leave it, that it doesn't have to be on the agenda unless any one of us wants to add it as an item because we want to propose whatever it is that we might see. Otherwise, it sounds like the majority opinion here is to leave it as is, but I know for me, and it's sounding like Commissioner Grant, we're just looking, I should speak for myself. I'm looking for, another month to look at it. But it might be that at the end of that, I'm not, I don't see the need to put it on the agenda unless someone identifies something to actually propose or talk about.
Commissioner Hart.
I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to say something really quickly about kind of why I'm thinking about this the way that I am. And partly to make clear that, I think that when people are concerned about the capacity of police officers specifically to use social media or problems that might arise from police officers specifically using social media, I think oftentimes, and there's a legitimate concern there that that police officers have additional powers that might render some of those communications on social media either additionally coercive or additionally kind of traumatic and problematic for people that are on the receiving end of those messages. So that seems to be the problem that that if officers kind of have, if there's some kind of supplemental social media policy, it's in order to kind of try to alleviate some of those specific concerns. And I think that, like I said, I think that there are legitimate reasons to be concerned that that if kind of officers are, or if members of the police department are regularly reaching out to someone, and that kind of has the capacity or the potential to color that interaction with kind of with the it puts it against the backdrop of a law enforcement activity, which is additionally coercive for people that receive those messages. So I think that that's a legitimate concern, but I don't think that's the way to address that particular concern is to say, just going to make every single direct message that an officer might give to someone else impermissible, or impermissible absent kind of clear express requests for permission to do so, something like that. I just think that is kind of not the right way to solve that problem. Now, I do think that again, I think that in general, people who are using social media, people who are setting social media policies, or people who are setting social media directions for departments ought to be aware that that is a background concern. But in general, again, if you ask me, do I think that somebody who is kind of reaching out via social media to acknowledge someone's concern and apologizing as a DM, do I think that in itself is kind of coercive? I don't think so, right? I think that if you're not trying to use the kind of authority that you have to convince someone to either change their mind on something or to kind of view a situation a different way, if you're not trying to color that interaction with a kind of, against the backdrop of a law enforcement activity, then I don't think that the mere existence of a DM itself is the thing which is problematic. Now, I understand that people disagree with me on that. Some people think that any DM which is kind of unwanted is problematic, and any DM by a police officer can be problematic. But I think that the main concern then ought to be kind of regulating those particular situations in which it's kind of coloring the interaction in ways that it shouldn't. So if there were a policy that were proposed by someone on the commission that spoke directly to those particular kinds of concerns, I would certainly be happy to look at it and express my thoughts about it. But that's probably the reason why I'm concerned about kind of a blanket prohibition, because I just don't think that every single one of those interactions has those effects, either that it colors the interaction negatively on the law enforcement, that it's kind of trying to use the officer's authority in a way which kind of prejudices the encounter, the exchange.
Well, I guess with that, then this will be off the agenda, and if anyone, if by any means, if anyone has any further discussion on this they want to bring up, I'll be happy to put it back on. But I think until that time, I think the policy stands, and I don't think we need to do much more unless people want to do their own dives into this. By all means, be my guest. But I think until further notice, I don't think this needs to be on the agenda. That the city policy stands as is. And with that, we shall move on to the amended agenda. Kyle is on his way home. He just texted me, so he should be available in about 10 minutes. With that being said, we will jump into the next agenda item, which is a discussion on the City Council's resolution asks from their meeting on 9/8/2020. And basically that ask was, I'm going to read the language of that again. Their ask is, be it further resolved that the City Council requests that the Police Commission immediately begin a review and analysis of impediments to stronger disciplinary measures in police encounters involving brutal or excessive force, and recommendations for modifications with a report back to the City Council by November 30th, 2020. I guess I will see my notes here. Sorry. I guess in regards to this, I don't see a problem with that per se, but the mayor's press conference from Friday, he stated that he asked the city attorney to review the BPOA contract to better align with the community's wants and needs. And me personally, from looking at this, a lot of the roadblocks I think are in that contract. So I'm curious what others think. I feel like this is being asked currently by the mayor of the city attorney to look into this. And I do think that overlaps with what's being asked by city council. I'm happy to. I'm happy to fulfill their ask, but I guess what are people's thoughts on this, on the overlap and moving forward? Commissioner Durfee.
Yeah, when I read it, I had some of the similar thoughts as you, Commissioner Chair Gamache. The contract is effective until 2022. Is that correct?
I believe it runs through 2022.
Yeah, yes. And so, being new to the police commission, I try to read every document that comes by. I read, a lot of documents before I even, was officially in a meeting. And this is one, the contract is one document I've read over and over again. And I've worked with contracts before, and I'm not sure what could be done in addition to. So even if DC Sullivan or Chief Murad wanted to speak to that, because when I read it, yeah, please, sir.
DC Sullivan.
I would just say that collective bargaining is a negotiation process. So it's not, so just so everybody's clear, although the contract itself actually expires until a new one is signed off on, it controls. So it will continue until a new contract is negotiated, but that process is exactly that. It is a negotiation. So when you seek to make changes, it's usually a give and take process. And certainly the union will be, I know from past experience that I would say that the union has usually been reasonable as far as trying to negotiate and making some concessions, but again, it's a give and take process. So I just want to know that.
Yeah, I guess what I want to say in light of that comment, sorry, Jabu.
No, all good.
In light of that comment is you're just confirming that, the contract is the contract. Negotiations can start, and then that can be the conversation about changing policy. But right now, until 2022, that's the disciplinary procedures that are in that contract are the ones that will govern until that time. Isn't that correct?
Commissioner Grant.
That is correct. And they will, I believe they would also continue to govern if if a new contract can't be settled, or if a new contract goes into any form of longer negotiation or arbitration. The one that exists will be maintained, absent memorandums of understanding or agreements between the parties.
I'd just like to add that historically, sometimes that has taken more than a year, sometimes multiple years.
That's been my experience.
Commissioner Grant, I saw your hand up for a comment.
Yes, and actually, in response to the last statement, that is why I'm an advocate of starting to look at that and have discussions to prepare for the negotiations well in advance, so that everyone, all parties involved, have a clear understanding of what needs to be looked at. And for my mind, it's those few pages that cover the discipline. The pages that cover vacation, pay, and other things like that, we don't need to address that. Those aren't, I'm a supporter of unions, and the officers are indeed entitled to certain things that I'm not questioning. But it's those few, I think it's like not even 3 pages in that document. And anyone in the public that's watching, it's a public document. Please read those pages because they're very important. And I feel that they have interfered in the past with having discipline that really measures up to what these use of force incidents really required. And also supporting a culture possibly within the department where not quite sure how to put this. I remember former Commissioner Dunn saying at the Committee for Policing Policies, when we were talking about the discipline that had occurred, and he made a statement, something to the fact, I wish I remember exact words, but something to the fact that the discipline that was given was all the culture would allow. And I thought, like, wow, that's, what does that say about the culture? So that, I think, is something that needs to be looked at sooner rather than later, so that certain hard conversations are started to happen right now, so that when it gets closer, it's not a big surprise to everyone, right? And some things are kind of thought out, discussed in detail. Both sides share their information, but these pages and the contract for our city's police department. The same thing is happening nationally. Once again, this is a national issue. Extraordinary protections that inhibit discipline that the public requires or demands or feels that this is what needs to happen, so that if someone feels that they have to call the police, they don't have to worry about who's showing up at their door. So that's kind of what I have to say on that. I don't want to see us encourage that the review of these pages and deep conversations related to these 4 pages be put off too late, so that now we're dragging it out and we have something that I feel is kind of out of date in some respects. Thank you.
Commissioner Hart.
Thanks. So with respect to kind of what City Council is asking for, I think that it might be helpful just to, I don't think that everything that City Council is asking for can just be exhausted by appealing to the contract. I think it might be helpful to put together a very quick document that explains how discipline is handled from start to finish and where the various degrees of freedom are along that process. That requires not just kind of looking at the language in the contract, but also what are the policies that are in place at the time. And then with respect to just a quick thing in response to what Commissioner Grant was saying, so obviously there are kind of national overtones to some of this, but when we look at kind of accountability, police accountability, well, in a sense, right, there are kind of 3 ways officers are generally held accountable. There's kind of criminal liability, there's civil liability, violation of department policy or internal department discipline. Some of those are national, of course, and then the hands are tied with respect to kind of how how protections are understood by the 4th and 14th Amendments, things like that. But there's some say here about how whether officer discipline within a department is formal or informal. That's another way of ensuring accountability. It might be just helpful to put together a document that explains kind of how that process works, and like I said, what the degrees of freedom are there, so that there's less confusion about what that looks like, who's responsible for each step, and so if people want to make changes in that process along the way, they would know where to make those, where to intervene or where to make those changes.
Thank you. Commissioner Durfee.
One more thing, when I bring up the contract, the ask for the City Council is to review impediments to stronger discipline. That's the sentence. It's review impediments. So really just clarifying what the contract governs, not saying that we shouldn't delve into it and look at policy and whatnot. I do think it's a good, to bring up, but I think we really just need to be aware and of the constraints of that contract.
I think I saw Chief Murad's hand up.
I'll defer to Commissioner Grant, who also has her hand up.
Commissioner Grant.
Thank you, Chief. I was just going to say some of the impediments in my mind, from what I read in those 3 to 4 pages, is problematic, and I think having a conversation to really flesh that out in terms of what some of that actually means, and how is it being interpreted. And we might need the city attorney to weigh in, because I don't know if some of the things are the things that can be discussed publicly, because of, obviously I'm for having as much public discussion as possible, but when talking about specific examples of discipline in terms of how they were handed out with regards to what's in the contract, I don't know that, I don't believe that can be public. So I just wanted to add that. I just feel like, some of the impediments are what's in the contract. So even though we have to abide by what is in there now, it is something that needs to be discussed for the future. And I know I'm beating a dead horse. I just think it's a conversation that needs to start sooner rather than later. I think it'll make everything else easier. when it comes time as well.
Commissioner Harp.
Yeah, so just to respond quickly, I mean, I don't think I hope I wasn't being understood as a suggestion that the contract does not impose constraints on discipline. The suggestion was just that those are not the only constraints, and that's not the only thing that makes up how discipline is determined. So I think that just focusing on the contract is not actually fully addressing the task that City Council set for us.
Commissioner Grant.
Thank you for that clarification, because I'm not saying to only focus on the contract. I just have experience in the past in the Committee of Policing Policies that there's just a lot of pushback to look at it. So I am advocating very strongly for it because I think it's a very important piece. And I do recognize that it's part of the problem, but because there's been so much pushback on it before, that's why I'm just continuing to advocate hard for that review, in addition to other things. Thank you.
Chief Murad.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that with regard to the specific language, I'm glad that we're talking a little bit about discipline as opposed to the specific language of the resolution, simply because disciplinary measures for excessive force are criminal. They're not disciplinary issues. Excessive force is prohibited in our directive. It's prohibited by the law. It is by definition something that is unreasonable. And I did speak to that prior as this resolution was being drafted. Police encounters involving excessive force are criminal. They're not disciplinary issues.
Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner Harp. Nope. Okay. So I guess moving forward then, how do we want to tackle this then? I'm happy to look into this. I would love some help into looking in, I guess, to maybe formulating this report that they like. And seeing how three of you are already on the subcommittee doing other things, guess I'm looking at Shireen and you all for some help on this report moving forward. And I guess I'll contact you guys after the meeting and hopefully starting something up about this. Commissioner Harp.
I'll just say quickly, you can feel free to run anything by me, ask questions, run drafts by me, that's fine as well. So
awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. And seeing how Mr. Dotson is here, despite it saying Jabulani Gamache, I wish I did have his height, but that is not Jabulani Gamache, that's Kyle Dotson. And so I welcome you to this commission meeting. You already know Chief Murad. I believe you might know DC Sullivan. If everyone wants to quickly introduce themselves to Kyle, I'd appreciate that.
Hi, Kyle, Shireen. Good to see you.
Good seeing you again, Kyle.
Hey, Guy, you all.
Hey, Kyle.
Grant.
And last but not least, we have Shannon Trammell, who is our fearless clerk and executive assistant to Chief Murad. So basically, Kyle and I had a great meeting yesterday. Just kind of wanted to pick his brain on his thoughts on the position moving forward. And I thought I would invite him here to kind of explain himself, what he thinks, what he sees moving forward, and to take any questions that you guys might have for him. And so with that, I'll give the floor to Mr. Kyle Dotson. Oh, sorry, you are muted.
Dang, Zoom etiquette. I tried. Good evening, and thank you, Jabu. Thanks for the invite, and thanks to all of you for inviting me here and having me here and giving me an opportunity to share and hopefully answer some questions that you may have. In the way of introduction, I'll try not to spend too much time on it, but certain things in this for me are sort of simple. They're simple in principle. They're hard to carry out, but part of what I hope to do is be able to leverage relationships. And I hope part of the value I bring is an honest and trusted broker, and to wade in where I think there's some polarity here that is one of the biggest impediments to move forward. And I'm hoping that I can somehow become involved, hopefully bring different resources, thought, and maybe players that aren't currently as perhaps visible, but who might be able to bring some important, what's the word I'm looking for, alignment within movement to play in our collective conversations. Once again, with the hope of just narrowing the gap. I'm daunted by the task. I am entering with full humility, but I think that things are possible in this small community we have. The scale and scope makes things possible that would be very difficult elsewhere. And I hope to leverage and exploit to the best, in the best use of the word, that scale and scope we have to help and become a part of moving things along. The biggest premise that I just have not experienced clarity on necessarily as broadly as I think is necessary in our community and nationally is we are our country founded on racist principles. So much of the creation of our nation was founded on racist principles. And they've continued throughout our history, and they continue to today. And we don't have time tonight. I'm sure it's been presented, but I believe there's substantial objective evidence about that. That's not only opinion. I believe that if one spends the time, there is significant subjective evidence to that. I don't believe we have fully acknowledged that and the impact that has, and the degree to which, whether we want it, and that's in particularly, this is what's particularly hard about this, is the systemic and institutional racism is only one direction. And that's what makes it hard. It is a birthright. I was talking to someone today, and it was an out-of-towner, a white gentleman from Boston who reached out to me in this moment, and he's involved in dialogue and mediation and working with communities. And he heard about it on NPR, and he reached out to his colleague here in Burlington, who's a friend of mine, just to offer help. He has no other skin in our game. But he was talking, he said a tough pill to swallow is all you have to be doing, America, is just be born white. That's all. The rest is done for you. Everything's been set in motion. The table has been laid, and you can do seemingly benign things, and they have racist impact. For example, you move into a town, you look for a nice town with good schools. That effectively in America is code for white. That generally, if it's a public school system, it is probably a predominantly white town that you're moving to. And it's not predominantly white by accident. And there's lots of evidence of who gets mortgages, who gets steered to what direction, what happens real estate. So you're in this town, and then you go to the PTA meeting and you advocate for the things your kids use. And if you're upper middle class educated person, you often will have more leverage in that space than people who are impoverished and don't have a history of education and don't have the language and don't know how to work the system. And you can set up things for your children. And I've got children, let's be clear. This path I'm talking about happens to be my path. My experience is anomalous as an African-American male, but I know it well because it is my path. And so you just do those things and you think it's innocuous, but the problem is it feeds into the racism. It feeds into the achievement gap. It's those seemingly benign things that are amassed on top of all the history. And then we have disproportionate outcomes, disproportionate treatment, and a whole bunch of things that happen. So that's a premise. I don't believe our community has embraced that at the degree that it's called for. I think, speaking honestly, I feel that we have a certain smugness about our liberal progressive perspective. We are not, we can't accept ourselves. We like to think of ourselves a place apart. We are America. We are America first. And if you ask a BIPOC person, they have experienced things in our state that are just as egregious as anything that goes on anywhere else. And it's kind of scapegoating. I think sometimes liberal folks point to the Confederate flag waving person as the problem. I actually think that person's less the problem because we've generally got a handle on that. If you were doing the kind of egregious things, if you're walking around and burning crosses and doing craziness like that, we actually have some remedy for that. But if you're subtly being involved in this system where you can do this thing over here, like smoke and mirrors, shell game, and it actually has this impact over here, I think there's more of that going on, and that's really difficult. So, and that is not an individual indictment. That's important. This is an important part. Part of what I hope to do is make it clear that is not an individual indictment. That is a collective situation. And part of why this is so difficult to deal with is that the toxicity and the insidious nature of racism plays out collectively. But individuals, particularly white folks, you get up in the morning, you go work hard, you make a modest living, try to put some food on the table, come home, take care of your kids, to be then have to face this label of being called racist. I get that that's difficult. That's part of our challenge, is that individual white folks are just living their life. But the problem is the history makes it so that all those individual white lives create difficult situations unless those white lives are proactively helping to fight the history, helping to overcome this legacy, what we inherited. Unless we fight actively against it, it continues unabated. It just does its thing. And so part of what I hope is to reach out and capture the hearts of Burlingtonians and help where there's a lack of understanding, a lack of empathy, to get more. But I also am a believer that there are legitimate issues as it relates to our police. I think that there is a degree to which most community members are out of touch. I think that actually part of the problem is it's the nice people in their backyards having a suburban cookout who basically don't get involved in police matters. They just know the police protect them. And they're basically contracting out the dirty work, the difficult work of dealing with so much of what happens in the community, whether it's dealing with addiction and mental health. I agree that we sometimes pile some of the most challenging work without thinking about what it means to do that work on teachers and police. So I understand the beleaguered nature in those professions. I think that needs to be addressed, but it's not either or. I think sometimes it comes down to an either or. And I also would posit that we have to be careful not to equate the pain. Even though there is a beleaguered nature to being a cop, at the end of the day, police do have a gun and a badge, and they have the law behind them. And I don't think it's the same thing when those tools are misused. I don't think that's the same thing as what's happening on the other side. Perhaps the behavior and the difficult choices that some people are making out there, often because of something in their life. I'm not a people are born evil person. If we peel back the layers, people who are behaving in antisocial and dysfunctional ways, there's often reason behind why they're behaving that way, which is not to condone or let them off the hook. People are accountable, but it just it creates a different understanding, I think, in a different way we as a society and as I think police departments deal with those behaviors. But I want to be clear that part of what I see as my job is to help the community show empathy all around where empathy is necessary, and also speak hard truths about what is objectively and can be objectively true and can be demonstrated through evidence. And then I think it's a process of us talking about how we resolve this. Also, hopefully everybody agrees where we are now is unacceptable. And that all of us here, I don't know exactly what y'all's age is, but I would argue that, making a judgment, we're all of the age, or the vast majority of us, that a lot of the die has been cast for us. What we do as the adults is going to have a much more significant impact on the 10 and 12-year-olds than it is on any of us. And that's a responsibility. We're not doing it for us. We're doing it for the future of this community. And I'm going in trusting that we all love our community. And so can we come together and do something much better than what we're doing today to ensure a better future for our kids. So that's all kind of, fairly conceptual and philosophical, but I think that's important. And the nuts and bolts, we're going to play that out, and we're going to learn as we go along. But I'm hoping that a big part of it is going to be different dialogue than we've had thus far, different people involved. It's been amazing to me, the outpouring of support and engagement after this announcement. And I hope to be able to leverage some of that to help us move forward. And I welcome questions.
Commissioner Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. So you said a lot about the kind of messaging and engagement outreach side of things. And you said at the end, well, the nuts and bolts, we'll figure that out. But and this question is kind of coming from a position of profound ignorance. So,
sure.
And it probably shouldn't be. But I guess I'm wondering kind of how exactly the division of labor is working, especially with respect to kind of the policing transformation bit, right? So, so my understanding is that, insofar as I can reconstruct the org chart in my head, right? The police commission is kind of under city council in the org chart, we're kind of under the mayor in the org chart. And so I'm not sure kind of how you see that division of responsibilities going for actually affecting changes in public safety. Kind of what duties get assigned to or left to the mayor, and presumably then to you in your capacity, and what duties are left to or assigned to city council, which they can kind of divvy up between police commission, city council, city. Yeah, so how do you see that working? And then also kind of a supplemental question to that, given that Taisha is also kind of under the mayor in that side of the org chart. How do you see your work and her work interacting or intersecting?
Sure. So I want to be clear up front that this is still somewhat of an evolving situation, and I have my own answers. Some of them have been derived through an opportunity to hash them out with Moreau, and some of them are my own insights and deductions about how it might play out without necessarily having mapped it all out with Moreau. And I would say that the reasons for that are because it was a fast-moving train. I think Moreau was sensitive to the difficulties of working through what needed to happen for me professionally, and the need to be discreet at the early points while we were still getting buy-in. As you all know, I was the CEO of the Y, lots of constituents. We have members, donors, staff, board, all sorts of people who needed to be informed and have a sense that the Y that there could be a sense of comfort that my stepping away for a period of time wasn't going to have too deleterious an impact on the Y. And I think Moreau, because of how things are developing in the community, felt a sense of urgency to do something. And I think that his thought was that some of the announcements he made and the creationist position were moves that he hoped would ultimately be seen as forward progress on things in the community. I think there's a rightful fear on people's part that there's some sort of undermining or usurping of processes that are in place. I don't see it that way at all. I think part of it is a capacity issue. I know just from the small bit of communicating and outreach and connecting that I've done in 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, this effort needs and should be welcoming to any additional capacity that it can find. Because I believe that so much of this is sort of like it's retail work, right? It's singles. If we're playing baseball, it's grinding out on the ground. This isn't a long pass thing. It's 2 yards, 1 yard, 3 yards. And that's just more, it takes more capacity, more time consuming. So I think that what Moreau was trying to do was bring in a resource that's additive. This is me. And that could leverage some things to support work that's already going on. So to the degree that there's the Charter Change Commission, there's already work going on with use of force. There's already work going on with the contract. I don't see myself taking over any of those things. I think they're all in place, and in working with the various entities who are dealing with those things, with the assumption that we all want them to move. If there's ways that I can bring resources and perspective to bear that can support the deepening of that work, or the expediting of that work, or things that we collectively see as being helpful, then that's what I would plan to do. I think there's a huge, that Chief Murad and I had a conversation. One of the things he expressed some sort of frustration, perhaps, or sort of a, what do we do with this, was one thing is when we talked about racism being pervasive, understandably, as an action person, he would love to have a way that we can say, here are specific things that are problematic, and here are specific remedies. And I agree with that, but I think this problem sort of exceeds our ability to neatly and simply do just that. Where racism is, racism's like cancer. It metastasizes, it mutates, it morphs. It can show up here and look like something else. It is a very wily foe. And so I think there's a different approach that's needed for part of it. And I think that if I have any value, it's entering into that space, and really, quite frankly, leveraging relationships, and appealing to people to step forward. Sometimes bringing to light things. So there's things that happen in small private conversations. Sometimes maybe those things aren't the most helpful because they're not particularly accountable, because a conversation happens over here without having to take into account the conversation that's over here. But if I come in the middle, and I come in the middle because both those two parties said, we love this appointment, we love our city, we want to help. So then I say, okay, I'm going to tell you how we can help. And then I have some conversations over here that create a little more accountability, because people had a narrative and a story over here that was independent of some other things that need to be considered. And the same thing was happening over here. And by pointing those two things out and using some relationship, I think sometimes there's ability to have both those parties consider narratives beyond the narrow one they were considering. And I think that can be positive and help us move down the road. So I hope I'm not evading the question, but quite frankly, I think that it's mostly going to be a symbiotic relationship. Directly, my understanding, some of the things that are direct authority is, for example, if Chief Murad wants to is asked to be interviewed, or is going to make some public statement about what this movement, what does police transformation look like? How are we connecting with the protesters? How are we interacting with the BIPOC community? That's something that we would do in concert. And I don't anticipate, it hasn't been the case, but to the degree that Chief Murad wanted to communicate something that seemed like it wasn't particularly helpful to the cause, I believe I have the authority to weigh in and say, I really think we need to do this communication differently. I don't see in my communication in relationship with Chief Murad yet that that's something that's going to be necessary. But if we're talking about brass tacks, my understanding is that Moreau, the mayor, believes that is an authority that he has, and he endowed this position with that authority to be used on an as-needed basis. And there are other specific things I think that I'm still coming to understand as a total newcomer to this situation, but effectively, in an effort to be able to exercise whatever authority that the mayor has to impact certain conversations and certain actions as it relates to the idea of transforming how we look at policing. He tried to imbue this position with those powers in an effort to have a hand in how things move forward. That all helpful, Randall?
It was, there was an answer in there. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's an answer.
It's a complex topic. Unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of that. I'm not a soundbite guy.
No, I think as you suggested, it will continue to make itself more clear kind of as we move forward.
There's a fairly significant leap of faith, and that's uncomfortable. I think that there is that there are other processes and other situations where there's more I's dotted and T's crossed. I think there could be more in this, but I do believe that really going after this challenge sometimes eludes our ability to fit everything neatly in a framework and an outline. That's my belief.
See, Commissioner Durfee has her hand raised.
Hi, Kyle.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you again.
Good. Nice to see you too. So getting to that was a lot. So I'm actually going to ask a question about strategic resource management. So I'm out here in the North District, and people are looking at this situation from a public safety standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint. I know I am, as a person who pays taxes out here. I'm on the avenue. I totally, can feel that. And people, we've done a lot of work, but I think what I want to understand is, when I look at Chief Murad saying specific things, because I'm a data person, I'm a retail person, Kyle, you know that. So
Yes.
you're going to run out of money and not get the job done. And so that was my concern. That's probably part of the reason that I joined the police commission. But the specific question that I have is, anyone on the team, or is there a plan? I know that we look at the chief's labor, the labor of the police department as it relates to how many people he has scheduled. That's really where I spend my time, looking at, how the police department is going to operate with less and less and less officers, and, the constraints that they're going to have. And then also, I have a concern that public safety, we won't have a chance to put the pieces of the resolution together to make sure that some of the work that's not going to be done by the police department is going to be done and by trained individuals. The mayor has talked about adding a couple of community liaisons to the police department. That's great. It seems like it might be a good move. I don't know. They're not there yet. But with less officers and less resources, are you going to be involved in any of the sort of strategic resource management in terms of, like, how, when we lose officers, what's the plan? Will you be working at that capacity, or will there be other folks that you'll bring in to work on that, just to ensure that while we go through this transformation, the public's safe?
Sure. So that's a good question, understandable question, a challenging question, but it would be interesting. Once again, Chief Murad and I are just getting to know each other, but some other people in the community know me. First and foremost, I'm a pragmatist. I'm a realist. I'm a face up and be accountable to what's in front of you. And I say that to say that I am not at all a fan of abolish the police, nor am I even necessarily a fan of defund the police without a very clear strategy and sense of how you're going to address some of the concerns that you raised. So if I were to be speaking with, and I will be speaking with Chief Murad, and as I learn more about the intricacies and the complexities of providing public safety, and if I were brought into a conversation about some tension between an actual need that I could see, and part of this is I'm being put in a position where I get to make a call. But if I'm looking at the situation and I can see how a certain resource is necessary and it adds to the public safety of our community, and it could be one of those things that in the call for eliminating certain resources to make room for others, that I feel like it would be a loss to the public safety aspect, even if there were community voices, BIPOC community voices, others who were calling for that resource to be taken away. If I could see it, because I'll be given access that people in the community may not have. And if I can see how that resource is necessary, I would go to bat for that resource, because I'm going to take advantage of being put in this position to vote my heart, my conscience, my intellect, informed by community input, but there are times when emotion and rightful indignation and hurt at treatment can sometimes lead to things that aren't the most strategic, aren't the most tactical, and don't lead to the best outcome. And I'm interested in the things that are the most strategic, are the most tactical, in light of the things we're trying to do. So to the degree that I have opportunity to get involved in those things, and back to Randall's question, is not exactly clear, quite frankly, what the role is. My personality is to enter in a collaborative way. I wouldn't even really want the hammer to come in and say, you have to do it this way. I don't believe that's the best way to get things done. So if you ask anybody at the Y, I'm the CEO, I have the hammer. I never use a hammer. I don't, the way that I, lead it, it's not necessary to use a hammer. I think if you set the organization up a certain way, you have a certain culture, you're going after the right things, and you respect people, you can move to goals without having to hammer people over the head. So I'm hoping that it'll be clear in conversations to a certain degree. If everyone's on board that there's a way we want to do this job of public safety, then I think that when we're in a squeeze, the squeeze won't be because I think this resource is important because it's always been there, or that's how we do it. I think this resource needs to be here because it has a demonstrable good to the whole community, not parts of the community. And that's the position I would hope Chief Murad would take. I share that position. If it's a resource that supports the public safety of the whole community and is being deployed thoughtfully, then I think that resource should be there. And we have to figure out how it's not, I don't want it to be a zero-sum game. We don't take away one needed resource to put in another needed resource. Hopefully we lobby and get the community to put forth all the needed resources. So it strikes me that there's need for, at times, uniformed officers doing that part of the job, and there's need for social workers and other intervention. And I'm hoping we can, in this assessment, my understanding there's an audit to understand what the needs are, that we can get some clarity on what those needs are, and then we deploy resources as we see fit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions out there? Oh, we have Mr. Dodson here. I am not seeing any. Kyle, thank you very much for your time. I do ask that you kind of hang out on the panel for, let's see, I think we have a couple more points, specifically in regards to agenda item 5.05, body worn camera footage policy. So moving on with the amended agenda, the next, all right, moving on. The next agenda item is a discussion on the mayor's press conference ask, specifically in regards to forming a policy on the release of investigations into officer misconduct. His other ask will be discussed in agenda item 5.05. So yes, the mayor has asked us to look into forming a policy that kind of helps with the release to let the public know about investigations into officer misconduct. I'm not sure if anyone was able to, I think I sent out the press release, the press conference to most of y'all. I'm not sure how many were able to view it, but were there any thoughts on that specific ask of his? Commissioner Durfee.
I'm sorry, I'm just asking for clarification. Are you talking about the memo from Moreau about the release of body cam footage?
So we were going to talk about that, I believe, in item 5.05, the body cam release footage thing. This amendment was just specifically on that, on the first policy ask.
Okay, got it.
Awesome. So, Commissioner Hart.
No, I'll just say, I would appreciate having some guidance about what is going to be consistent with various officer protections, either contract-based or otherwise, with respect to kind of informing people about the status of investigations in progress, but I don't see any problem with formulating some guidance surrounding how to release that information, whether that's, again, directly to the public or to city council or whomever.
Yeah, neither did I. The only things that kind of stuck out to me that might be roadblocks would be, how like running afoul for, I guess, from like HR perspectives for investigations, and I guess might be a city attorney question, how to move forward with that to make sure we don't, violate those HR rights. Any other sorry, Commissioner Hart?
Yeah, I think I'd want more clarity from the mayor's office. It's so broad in scope, and that might be what he's looking for, but and I don't know if that's something for Kyle to help us with to get that clarity, or if we should be reaching out to the mayor's office. I'd be looking for more clarity on, is he looking at the 10,000 foot view? Is he wanting to know commission work on investigations as well, or is this strictly, and maybe it's in that document, and I apologize if it is, Chair, but the scope of this ask in terms of the extent, is it just the internal investigations? Maybe it's obvious to everyone else. It sure isn't to me.
Commissioner Grant.
I think it's going to be addressing multiple issues. There may be things that we feel would meet certain guidelines to be released to the public. But then there may be things that have an internal investigation that's ongoing that maybe can't be released to the public, but should be reviewed by the city council, the elected officials within an executive session. A lot of the controversy, hurt, resentment was that not even citizens, elected officials had access to information. They should have had that information sooner, even if it couldn't be made fully public for reasons of internal investigation. So I think it might be establishing criteria for a few types of situations. Thank you.
Great point. Thank you. So I'm hearing that we should I'll reach out to the mayor, and I guess Kyle included in that, on I guess what to move forward, what they're exactly looking for, and to fold in Milo's concerns in there as well. Does that sound like a good plan to everybody else? Awesome. Then moving on to agenda item 5.05, body worn camera footage release policy. And I know the mayor's press conference threw up some question marks on our work on this. So I guess one ask that I have is that I guess kind of for Kyle, I guess in that regard, we have a subcommittee working on this, consisting of Commissioner Durfee, Harp, and Grant that are looking on this. Is the mayor is the mayor looking for is he still looking for us to do this, or does he want us to completely adopt his policy? Because I know they're working hard on this, and I don't want redundancies in work, I guess, really, and I just want to make sure that everyone's time is being used best. And I guess I'll turn it over to one of the people on that subcommittee, I guess, for further clarification. Commissioner Harp, followed by Durfee.
I'll defer to Commissioner Durfee since she's the chair of the subcommittee.
Thanks, Randall. You said it, Chair. That's all we're looking at. That's what I am looking for. Also, just for Kyle, are you aware of the legislation that passed the House? Obviously, the state is adjourned, but There has been a state level, it hasn't been adopted, it hasn't been passed the Senate, but there's a lot going on with the release of the footage. So not only did we get this, but probably 2 days prior, the state passed some legislation that is pretty detailed and will pertain to, all of the police departments in Vermont if it's passed. Also, and I know Commissioner Harp will speak to this because it has not. He keeps reminding me that it has not been it has not been voted on. But we don't, from a strategic resource management, we definitely want to be doing work that that this definitely needs to be done. And when I look at what was sent out, it's a pretty clear set of directions. And then also, if you read, I've read the legislation too. So looking for some direction. Should we, continue on? I know that we can do, policy can be on top of anything that passes at a state level, but wondering, do we stop the work and wait for that to pass? What's your thought on that?
So my thought is at the level of intent, I don't believe that the intent was for this role to take over good work, that there's been agreement that it moves us in the right direction of having a more responsive, more accountable way of providing public safety. This would fall under that. I think the particulars of that would be certainly best hammered out with Moreau, because there are any number of conversations that I'm new to, and I'm not going to pretend here to have all the answers to that. But in our conversations, I don't believe the idea was to say, okay, this process that's been in place and is moving is now being called to a halt, and we're going to supplant that with this other approach to doing the same work. I don't believe that to be the intent at all. But once again, on the details, and particularly how whatever I might be being asked to do can dovetail with and sync up with the current work, I think that would be best at this point directed towards the mayor to help flesh out some of what that alignment looks like.
Awesome. Commissioner Hart.
Yes, no, I'll just say really quickly. I think, I don't want to speak for everyone on the subcommittee, but I appreciate having the mayor's proposed policy for body cam footage. I think there's a lot that was useful in there, and I think that there are a couple of things that that the subcommittee might want to take additional looks at as far as supplementing, bringing under kind of the rubric of what we'd already been working on. But I think as far as the document goes, it's very helpful. There are a lot of very useful things that were in there. So I'm not sure as far as, again, I'll defer to Commissioner Durfee as far as what the timeline goes, whether it makes sense to kind of wait to see what happens in the Vermont legislature as far as a policy that would be governing every department in the state, whether it makes sense to pass something on for BPD before then or in addition to. So we'll continue to talk about that on the subcommittee, but I don't think there's I don't necessarily see a conflict between the document that the mayor put forward and what we've been working on. It's just, we might want to continue to supplement some things in there.
I see DC Sullivan's hand raised.
We've addressed this previously briefly, and the mayor's proposed plan also addresses this in some detail. I just wanted to share the fact that our lack of capacity for actually producing a lot of video is quite real. As of another week, I believe we're going to have one person who is capable of actually doing redaction on BWC video, and she's also our identification technician and is our crime scene processing expert. And that is her primary responsibility. It's cataloging evidence, taking care of our evidence room. And she tends to go frame by frame. So each video contains 30 frames per second. So for every second of video, she's looking at 30 frames and going through and manually redacting both audio and video. So again, that 3 times amount she said is relatively conservative for her, the way she goes through the redaction process. One thing I would just like to add is I'll read her statement verbatim, that she included a lot of detail as far as what she goes through as far as the redaction process. And I don't know that we need to get into technical minutia, but just so you have some feeling as to how she feels. She said, in closing, we simply do not have the technology, manpower, time, or money to accomplish what is being floated and demanded by some people. I am unwilling to take this on as part of my job, short of hiring someone or multiple people dedicated to doing this full time. This ask is not possible. Even implementing the Seattle model, where they blanketly blur the video and the audio, would take significant time that she does not have. I would urge the policymakers around this to really dive in and exhaust all possible options while engaged in the decision-making process. I just wanted to share that comment from her.
So 3 hands get raised. I'll go in order of them being raised. Commissioner Harp, Commissioner Durfee, followed by Kyle Dotson.
So in the university format, I'm used to getting that hand raised up quickly. No, thanks. So I guess my question is, so with the language that is in the mayor's proposed policy, and that language states that the police department will proactively release primary or representative body camera footage within 30 days of incidents of the following types: A, incidents that involve police use of force resulting in serious bodily injury or death to any person; B, incidents of police force that involve the use of aerosol agents, CEWs, police batons, LLIMs, firearms, or lethal force; and then C, kind of any incident for which the chief of police, mayor, and or majority of the police commission determined that the footage would address significant public attention or concern. So those are the 3 categories that are currently caught up for attention in the mayor's proposed policy. Do you think that with those 3 categories that would impose excessive obligations on the capacities of the department right now? So I'll just say, I think the subcommittee is very aware of the limited capacity of the department right now with respect to editing footage. So I'm wondering whether those 3 categories are taxing the department's capacity excessively.
I'm hoping that the sheer volume would not, but the issue, again, even with a low volume, will be, it will be dictated by other things. So for example, the individual I'm speaking of, again, her primary responsibility is crime scene processing and evidence catalog. And if we are busy, for example, when we had those 2 weeks with multiple shootings, our capacity is stretched to its absolute limit. So we absolutely would not, depending on the circumstances, even have the capacity to do what the proposed policy states.
Not just shootings. We had the burglary that I mentioned on Saturday night. We had vehicles that had to be seized. We had that suicide that I mentioned. While it was a suicide initially, it had aspects to it that required that we do our due diligence and send ID out. Her primary role is as an evidence. She's CSI. She's Burlington's, CSI, and so that is what she does. The ability to make video happen currently, when it's requested via a Freedom of Information request, is ancillary to that role. And so while Deputy Chief Sullivan's correct, the absolute volume of those kinds of incidents described by the mayor is not high, it's still more than what she does. And she has been operating alone in a 2-person office since January. That is a 2-person team that has been a 1-person shop since January.
I guess I have a quick question to that. I know the resolution prohibits hiring of new sworn officers. Is that a sworn officer position? I'm seeing head nods. No? Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, it is not.
Thank you. All right, sorry. Mr. Dotson, followed by Commissioner Grant.
And also, I don't know if Commissioner Durfee had a chance to speak up, but I think that in the queue, she was ahead of me. So
sorry.
It was Commissioner Harp, Commissioner Durfee, and Kyle. So I'm happy to yield.
Correct. My apologies.
Thank you, Kyle. I just want to add to DC Sullivan, Chief Murad. I went down and I saw. I understand that there's a real, issue with, redaction. Absolutely, that's heard. And I just want you both to understand that on the subcommittee, we do know that. We actually know the metrics that it would take to be off. That's how I know that's not a sworn position. And that's one thing I just want to say to Kyle. You both said it well. Is that's the strategic resource management of it. Is if it becomes, something that's, the public, the people really need to have. They need to understand that that's going to cost money and take time. And if we as a people decide, hey, this is the top priority, it's got to be public. And even if we had 2 or 3 people working on it at X amount of dollars, it's still, we need to understand the metrics of what that would yield. I yield the floor to Kyle.
Thank you, Karen. So part of this is putting together different pieces. So going back to the overarching questions about how I'll be deployed, what can happen. I'm learning and have so much to learn about the timing of the various pieces. But in my mind, before understanding what the various mitigating factors are, that there's different pieces of work and they can support each other. So one thing is this process of some sort of audit, which happens in all sorts of organizations. It seems like a very reasonable thing, and it sounds like it would be very helpful in the police department. So we get an audit and we start to get more confidence, more collective sense of what the resources we have and that they're being deployed towards a public safety approach that's progressive, that's impartial, that's fair, that takes into account. So if we do that, and then in that, we start identifying a pressure point, as DC Sullivan and Chief Murad have pointed out, around this issue of our own CSI and additional work that might be asked of that person as it relates to redacting and other issues. So it may sound pie in the sky, and part of my entry into this is with humility, but some belief and some vision. So already in just 2 days, now talk is cheap. We're going to see what's behind this, but someone reached out, incredibly excited about this, and in a way that seemed genuine, based on I have a relationship with this person, but this person has significant resources and unsolicited. They say, if in your work you find someplace in the police department where you need to find money to hire a position, you let me know. Now, we'll see if that's there, but I don't know if Chief Murad and and DC Sullivan have gotten that call, but I did. And if that person's real, I do believe that if we could identify a significant and demonstrable deficit in terms of resources to do something that we had also been able to substantiate as being important for the public safety of the community, I do believe that the experience I've had in the last couple of years and the incredible generosity of this community and the things they care about, I have been party to conversations with people putting money forward in ways that have just made my head spin. And I would argue to some of those people that as important as the work of the Y is, some of this that you all and I'm trying to join is more important. It's more critical. It's more dire. And I think if we can get it straight and we demonstrate to these deep pocket, deep care for our community people, that we had a plan moving forward that pulled in more of the community, had more oars pulling in the water in the same direction, I think we can make things happen where we're stuck currently. And so that's part of what I hope to be able to bring. I truly believe that could happen. And so that, as people were talking, that's an example of something I would love to be able to help catalyze, help facilitate. And I think there's reason to believe that that could happen.
I believe that Commissioner Grant was in the queue.
Yes, following up on that, in addition to human resources and talking about making funds available, part of the issue of doing the required redactions is how cumbersome it is based on the software that the city can afford. There are packages available with the quote unquote bells and whistles that add improvements to making the experience of going through the videos significantly faster. So that definitely needs to be part of the conversation as well. It's a lot of money for those extra bells and whistles, but they would be important in terms of meeting certain guidelines and getting the job done quicker so that somebody else can actually, and what would be the cost advantages? So if we can invest in this software in a way that we consider prohibitive right now, where does that save money in other areas? So just throwing that out there. And actually, Kyle, I will forward you. Chief Murad had sent a proposal with some information. I'll make sure you have a copy of that because it opened my eyes. I was like, let me see how much that costs. And I was like, Jesus, so it's it's a lot. And it's part of the equation. So I'll send that over to you.
Thank you, Milo. And I think part of this is, and I think it's part of what Chief Murad does a good job of articulating and being a advocate for, is there's lots of things that happen within the police station and within the work that's done there in the profession that's sort of like a black box. People don't understand this tension. We just talked about one of which I can only imagine there are hundreds of tensions of resource availability and allocation that are completely obscured from what the public understands about the work. I think that revealing some of those tensions, I think will be helpful. I think it'll be part of what we can do to move things down the track. I wasn't aware. I'm learning. I'm going to learn every day. I don't pretend to know everything and all the tensions, but knowing them, I think just helps us to manage them and to prioritize them. And the more of the community we can share with, we can have a collective sense of that. And I think if there's a collective sense of what is a community priority as regards to public safety, it's easier to get a community mandate, and it's just easier to move forward with community mandate. Well, that's my belief.
Thank you for that. So moving forward, then I believe the subcommittee should continue their work on this document, and I guess we'll stay tuned until next meeting to see what produces. I believe I'm understanding this correctly. Awesome then. That concludes item 5.05 on the agenda. Unless there's any other discussions or comments on this. Not seeing any. Moving on to agenda item 6, commendations. Shannon, take it away.
So the one that was passed on that I really wanted to highlight tonight that I forwarded to y'all was from Brian Lowe, the Chief Innovation Officer, regarding the great work of Paula Berry, who is a parking attendant, and during the early phase of the pandemic stepped forward to volunteer her time in the many, hundreds of thousands of masks that were received from the community, and separating those masks and labeling them and distributing them to people to pick up to distribute throughout the city that were given out. And he states that Paula was personable, reliable, effective, punctual, and full of good humor. She was a pleasure to work with, and was not bothered by the stress of the time. I would work with her again on any project in a heartbeat, and she is a great asset to the city. So I just wanted to share publicly that commendation that was received, as well as Chief Murad said, that the many support that comes in on the phones and everything in support of everybody that is facing challenge in these challenging times currently. And so that's all I have to share with you tonight.
Thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item number 7, commissioner comments and or updates. I have a quick, it's actually more of a question. This is for the chiefs. Is it possible to be emailed? I know we have a fair amount of department policies, department directives. Is it possible to maybe get a list of like all of them, just so I can see what we do have? If that's possible at all. Because I know we do have a fair amount, but I don't know every single one that the department does have, and I would love to be able to just know all the ones that are out there that I have not been able to look over yet. I'm seeing a head nod, so I think that shouldn't be a problem. Sorry, Shannon, did I see your hand raised?
I definitely can yield to any other. I'm certainly not a commissioner, but I did want to just, Landon wasn't able to attend this evening, and he did bring to my attention, which I'm very grateful for. It's been quite overwhelming, but the website I will update to remove Mark Hughes, and I believe that vacancy has been posted for his position, and as well as updating it to reflect that the commission has now moved to board docs. So I just wanted to acknowledge Landon in his comments that he had, and I certainly will do that first thing in the morning. The other thing I wanted to say is maybe for next meeting, and maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself, but someone from Department of Public Works wanted to address the commission on what they're doing with the parking, moving parking to Public Works and stuff. So for next time, that's all I have.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, I'm more than happy to put that on the agenda for next time. We'll get to that shortly. I want to thank Kyle Dodson for being here with us and giving us his time. I think I speak for most everyone here. I don't like to talk to everyone normally, but we're looking forward to working with you and see how this all transpires. So thank you very much. And I gave everyone your number, so if you get some phone calls and text messages from unknown numbers, that's my fault. Sorry. But thank you very much, and I look forward to talking with you, working with you soon.
That's all good. Thank you so much, Jabalani. Thanks to all of you. I'm really looking forward to this work. I love our community, and the opportunity to work with good people to move us to a better place is really exciting. And I must say that being back here, it's been a little while for me. I, did some school board service a couple of years back, and I've been out of public service, and it is a reminder. It is 8:30, and y'all are here. You're not getting paid. Everyone's thoughtful. Everyone has clearly done their homework. You're informed. I'm serious. It is heartening. Thank goodness we have public servants, because it is hard, and people don't realize the kind of time and energy that's put into it. So I thank you all, and I am impressed.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Same to you. Take care.
Talk soon. Yep.
All right. Moving on. Sorry, were there any other commissioner comments or updates that anybody wanted to bring up? Commissioner Durfee?
I wanted to ask a question about, and this is for the chiefs. So recently, I live across from the Laurentide development. That's at the CHT property, and there's some folks that became concerned, similar to what Commissioner Grant was talking about, where they were hearing things that, like, I can't respond, calling police, I can't come. I'm just not sure If you all are seeing anything like that, if you are, and these were, 4 or 5 different instances in the last month where people were just told, we cannot come out. We can't come out. One incident involved the Shell station on North Avenue. Another incident involved, some grappling on the side of the road. So, I'm not really sure how to respond to that. I don't really know that happens, and I don't want to quantify anything that I don't know about. But I did want to bring it up here, just sort of as a because this is a community forum, and I feel like sometimes those folks they don't show up on public forum, and they won't talk to anybody else. So just wondering if there's anything that my experience working with folks around in the neighborhood, sometimes things that can be things that we're not really supposed to respond to, but then other things are real and genuine concerns. So I just wanted to bring that up here.
So I'd be very interested in knowing when those incidents happened and being able to dig into them on a specific level. But on a general level, I can say that we have started responding to certain kinds of incidents differently, and not knowing what the incidents you asked about. The one you mentioned, one at a gas station store, but I don't know what that was. You mentioned one with 2 individuals grappling. Depending on how that's described, is that a violent thing that's happening? Is it an assault that's occurring? An assault should bring a response. And absent every officer being tied up with something else, it will bring a response. Other kinds of incidents may not, and we are diverting some to phone calls. The officers take them as they put it on 21, meaning that they'll call complainants and then deal with the complainant via phone first. There are a number that we're diverting to online complaint taking. So physical response has been altered. It was altered first by COVID. It has been further altered now by the fact that we are that we're short, and we're routinely rolling with 6 rather than our normal 8 on any given shift. And the officers who are on, we're holding officers for overtime with more regularity now. And doing overtime is something that officers usually, when they can pick and choose the overtime they want, that's a good thing, the ability to make additional money, et cetera. But their normal sources of that, which are additional duties such as parades or parties or things that would hire officers off duty, there are very, very few of those these days, owing to COVID and owing to the fact that the nightlife is different. But on the other hand, we are holding officers and mandating that they do overtime more often now because the next shift doesn't have sufficient resources. And so we're saying, in order to make certain that we've got a safe number of officers to work this next shift, you have to stay. And that's not something that generally officers are thrilled about. They anticipated going home and now they can't. And that adds up, and it adds up to response at times, sometimes as well. And that's not something that I am defending, nor am I going to sit idly by if that's the case. But I'd like to be able to see those specific instances. So there's a combination of diminished call capacity owing to, or not capacity, but diminished call response, physical response owing to changes in protocols and owing to resource. And then there's also the possibility of diminished response owing to diminished staffing and the stresses that officers are currently under. But again, I really would want to see the kinds of incidents we're talking about, because we will never not respond to certain kinds of incidents. And again, an assault on the side of the road should be a response.
Yes, and I could email you every time, but you answered my question. I mean, you gave me a list of things that I could possibly share with community members. That the police department definitely has changed some things because of COVID. And I could share resources, because I could definitely show somebody how to do an online complaint. I myself did an online complaint because it was a graffiti incident. I could have texted you and said, hey, but I'm happy with the response. There's a couple of things online, telephone, depending on what it is. And if there's a document or something that sort of maps out what if there's some kind of COVID alteration document that I can share with folks, that'd be helpful.
DC Sullivan.
I would just like to add that we did alter some response, as Chief Murad just said, in response to COVID itself. And the reason being that if COVID were to go through the police department like some other viruses have in the past, we would be decimated and we would have no officers or very, very few officers to respond. And so that is why we altered our protocol as far as response to some incidents.
Any more questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Which moves us to agenda item 8. Sorry. Yes, agenda item 8.01. Next meeting agenda items. So looking like the presentation from BPW for what they want to say. I'm also, I guess, continuation of the body cam. I guess an update, I guess, on where that is at for next meeting. And I'm going to reach out and gain clarity for the mayor's ask from his press conference, and then put that on the agenda moving forward. Any other agenda items anyone can think of that they'd like to see on the next meeting's agenda at this point in time? I'm not seeing any. If anything comes up, please let me or Shannon know, and we'll add that on there. And I ask that we move into executive session to discuss personnel matters and citizen complaints. Do I have a motion for that? Oh yeah, sorry, I think that's the second for that. Sorry, that's the motion. Do I have a second? Sorry. I think that was a second. All in favor of entering executive session for personnel matters and citizen complaints, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. It is 8:37. I say we should reconvene for that at 8:45. So quick bathroom break, grab a glass of water, and I will see all of y'all then. And I guess for public reasons, we will not be going back into the meeting, and the meeting will be adjourned after executive session. I think that's what I have to do, right? Awesome. For everyone that tuned in the public, thank you very much, and we'll see all of y'all shortly.